Welcome to Tech Driven Business, brought to you by Innovative Solution Partners. I'm honored to have Shawn Brown of SAP join me to kick off an essential two-part series to unpack a topic that's on every SAP user's mind, the Business Data Cloud, or BDC. If you're looking to understand how BDC can transform your data landscape and drive real business value, you are in the right place. Welcome to Tech Driven Business, Shawn. How are you?
I'm good. Things are going well. Staying busy.
That's awesome. So glad to have you on our show, and I'm really excited for the topic that we are going to discuss today. You ready for it?
I am. I'm excited as well.
Yeah, so I know we had talked in the past a couple of times, and right now the hot topic everybody's talking about from SAP and in general is the whole idea, the concept, and now the actual product called Business Data Cloud, and what it really means for SAP customers. I'd like to use this time to dig deeper into this conversation and have a better understanding of exactly what this brings, what kind of landscapes that are changing with this new product, and what to expect if you're a customer interested in going forward with BDC.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So I think every time we have this new products, right? And SAP is really good about, and people talk about rebranding and all that. Let's talk about the why of why should SAP customers adopt BDC? What is different about BDC that SAP customers should be asking that question? Why?
Yeah. This is my favorite question to start anything in the space that is outside of packaged solutions, ERP, HR, supply chain, and the capabilities we have in those areas, because the why is something that it should be the driver for everything, right? And for BDC, I would say the first thing we want to talk about is it's a new product, but it's an evolution of everything that we've been doing for years. It's capabilities that our customers already know about, and it's taking all of the capabilities that we have offered over the time we've been in the data and analytics space, and I call it a next generation, right? It's the next generation of what was. And so when we get into the why, I would say the first thing that we really kind of say is the reason for BDC is it is to short circuit the amount of time it takes to prepare from data to finally analytics and planning and all the steps in between, where oftentimes organizations see it as this wheel that they start with the data that's in the source system. They're going to extract it, transform it, load it, profile it, catalog it, place governance on it, maybe make it in a marketplace setting, organize it so that it can be easily digestible, create some standard analytics, and then now we can actually start analyzing it. And the why is really about reducing the amount of time it takes to go around that whole wheel of data all the way around to analytics and planning, and reduce the amount of prep time and increase the amount of analysis time. Because if we think about how much time a person gets to analyze the data, let's say, for example, and this is actually a number that has been verified with numerous customers and with the analyst firms like Gartner and Forrester and TDWI, is that it takes as much as 70% or more of the actual workload and investment to go from data to analytics. That's not just, so that means the analytics is just 30% or less of the time. So if we think about how much each question costs, you have to add in all of that cost to even deliver up the analytical or deliver up the data in a way that it can be analyzed. So BDC's goal is to shrink that time of preparation and actual delivery of data for the analyst purpose, or for the AI purpose, or for any application purpose, shrink it as much as possible so that the questions that are asked are cheaper. And essentially, we can ask more questions. We don't have to continue to reformat the data, deliver the data in a new way to get to the final answers that we're trying to seek. So I would say savings in cost, savings in money, more data, more analysis time. That's the why for BDC.
No, it totally makes sense. I think one of the things that while you're talking about this, that stuck out for me was we always talk about time value, right? And especially when it comes to analytics, it's such a critical part of any organization's path forward. And the numbers that you're just sharing from Gartner and other resources, where if the majority of the time is gone into the data collection, the data refinement, all that, there is no time left or a very minimal time for your analytics part, which makes it really difficult for organizations to make quick decisions. I think what I'm hearing from you, the why, the time value becomes very important in this case.
Correct. Absolutely.
That's good because that kind of takes me into this conversation like, hey, benefits. When you have that why understood, what are some of the benefits that BDC will provide to SAP customers who want to go on their journey? Because benefits is really the reason why it will make sense for them to move forward.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. And this is the one that's always interesting for organizations because they're focused so much on the actual preparation of the data that oftentimes the benefits that they can glean from all of that effort are fleeting. So if they look at the overall effort and they go, oh yeah, there's a lot here that is really based on how much it took to get here. And the faster we can deliver the capabilities for analysis purposes, for AI purposes, the faster we can make decisions, the faster we can adjust based on those decisions. And so when you think about the speed at which organizations operate, to be able to answer those questions faster is probably the number one benefit that you can get. And then you also get into accuracy. What questions are we asking? And if we don't have to go through this rigorous effort of moving data from all of these source systems and joining it all back together and then building all that business context, data integrity, is that a concern? It is for most organizations. They're concerned about what this looks like at its end state. And the other thing that still exists in the world of business, especially in the analytics space, is the typical spread marked problem where people just take the data that they're looking for, they extract it out of whatever solution it's been delivered to them. Maybe it's cheap cloud storage on flat files, or maybe it's been all dumped into an ODS, an operational data store, and then they're accessing the data as they like. If they don't understand the details of the data and the relationships that occur with the data, and they don't have the original business context that the data came from in its source system, then if they do extract it to whatever they like, then somebody can walk into a meeting with one version of the truth and another can walk in with another version of the truth. They all can believe that they're accurate. They all can argue over why their version of truth is correct and the others is not. So the confidence in the data is the other thing. We take away a lot of those concerns because when you have it coming from those source systems and that preparation of that data has been provided, in this case by SAP, for SAP systems at a minimum, you're going to have much more confidence that the data is delivered to you in a way that respects all of the integrity that it came from, that the accuracy of the data is as accurate as it was entered into the business application upon which it was the source. So the speed of delivery, the accuracy of the data, these are major advantages that you get with regards to using BDC versus the older school. I'll call it older school because I'm an old guy. The old days of Bill Inman and star schemas and relational database systems that we created, these massive data warehouses. It's an older school thought. And it was one that was born out of this idea that we had to get the data from those source systems because we couldn't query the source systems at runtime. All those things contribute to today where we're curating the data for you. It's been curated by SAP and from all SAP systems. So if you have any questions about the quality of the data in that case, you should have questions about the quality of your data in its source. There's a bigger issue. So speed of delivery, accuracy of data, those are probably my two top benefits that customers are going to get out of this.
Absolutely. That makes total sense. I think one of the things that really me was the whole concept of end-to-end governance. As BDC do a better job, how is that integrated to this whole BDC realm of the different pieces that makes up BDC? How is data governance and security working within those parameters?
Yeah. So in BDC, you're getting row level security on all the data. At that point, then you're asking questions like, how do my users access the data? What are they allowed to see? What are they not allowed to see? All those capabilities can be integrated into BDC. You can deliver all of those capabilities directly within BDC. You start off by setting up some broader, who's the group? What systems are they accessing? So if I'm in finance and I'm looking at finance data, I probably have access to, let's say, S4HANA as the backend system that is storing all this data. All the users within the finance team that have access to S4HANA can have access to that space of data. And I use that word space because this is a concept that, again, there's nothing new. We've invited these concepts into our thinking a while ago, and now it's just another generation of what we're doing here. So that idea of a space is I can include the data that is necessary for a line of business, HR, finance, supply chain, and that's what they can see. And if I need to, all of the rest of the data is accessible through BDC. It's just a question of whether I want to provide the rights to access those other data sets to another line of business, for example. So if I said I wanted to join, let's say, expense information that's in Concur with employee information that's in SuccessFactors, right? I can easily join those data sets, bring them forward from one space to another, and decide at a row level and column level what individual data set I need to join across those groups or individuals, if you will.
I think that's super good because that's where a lot of the questions come in. Every time you do move your data from one environment to another environment, then you need to have your own new set of governance and security, and it can be role level security or whatever else you want to do. You have to kind of redefine that. It seems like it's all built into the BDC portfolio. You're leveraging your source system objects and then be able to apply the same rules that you may have built in.
Yeah, the analogy I always liked was it's kind of like, and I don't know if they're really like this. I mean, maybe they are or not. I just remember old movies that you'd have these Japanese styled homes and they were like the walls that were almost paper thin that you could, it almost felt like you could just push your hand right through the wall and just grab something that was in the other room. I liken it a bit like that in terms of spaces. The spaces are separated in that way with a level of access that is very simple to provide when necessary, but distinctly in separate spaces, separate areas. So that's the benefit. That's the simplicity of being able to access data from any LOB or any third party for that matter. If you wanted to access that third party data in BDC to any other data that's in BDC as well, but whether it's finance, HR, supply chain, whatever it may be, warehouse, inventory, whatever it may be.
Totally. Now, since we talked about the benefits, let's look into the details. Like, what steps are involved if someone wants to take on this journey and move to SAP BDC?
Much of that begins with where are they right now? Let's take a few different scenarios. If customer is, let's say, already using some SAP solutions. Let's go with the most rudimentary that has been around for a while now for SAP. Let's talk about they're using HANA Enterprise. They've been taking a lot of data from their SAP systems and dropping it into HANA Enterprise on-prem. This is the natural next step to that on-premise approach where you said, all right, I don't necessarily want to be in the position of housing systems like this myself in my own data centers. I want to put them into the cloud. This is a simple transition to take the data from a HANA Enterprise, drop it into BDC, and start using that data in essentially what would be a component of BDC, DataSphere, but it's built on HANA Cloud. And HANA Cloud is built on the same technology that HANA Enterprise is built on, that in terms of its capabilities, what it can do. It's a natural transition for that case. If you're talking about a customer that's already using, let's say, another old product from SAP, BW, right? BW has been a really challenging one for a lot of organizations because they've had such value and such benefit by using BW to access data in SAP with those BW extractors. And in many cases, they've built a lot of and invested a lot in BW in the framework itself, creating their own objects, creating their own cubes, creating ADSOs, DSOs, and so forth, depending on what versions of BW you're on. And not necessarily wanting to just abandon that investment. There's another great example of is once you're at least BW 7.5 and above, we make it very simple for you to go ahead and take all of that BW investment and move it directly into BDC in its format, in its same format as a BW environment. BW for HANA, the same thing. We move it right into BDC. It would be in a cloud-based environment that way as well. And essentially, all of those connections back to the source systems still persist. When we talk about how do we take advantage of the investments you have, that's where you say, all right, well, I can access them through the BDC framework in BW that is now part of BDC and use it for whatever purpose. I leave it in BW in that case. Or I can start taking those particular assets that I have in BW and using the data product generator that is now part of BW embedded in BDC. I can then change those assets in BW to data products, which is the lowest level form of data that we have in BDC. And in this case, just for those that may be listening and wondering, am I copying the data? Yes. And we can come to this in a minute as to why you're copying the data, but we are copying the data from its source system, and we would be copying the data from BW as well, where we wanted to make it a data product in BDC. And we can talk about why that is in a minute, because it's a shift. It's a bit of a shift in terms of what we've talked about in the past with regards to a whole play the data where it lies, federate versus materialize that data in what was DataSphere, which is now part of BDC. That idea of moving those assets from BW into BDC as data products over time allows us to decommission those deployments of BW. So that's the benefit is we now have a path for BW customers to migrate to BDC, not give up those assets that they've created and leveraged for so many years in BDC, and then over time decommission BW altogether. Or if you're really interested and you really like using BW, keep it. That's the other benefit of moving a BW 7.5 environment to BDC is you're going to get 3 more years of mainstream maintenance. And for example, for BW 4 HANA, we're pushing that end of life date all the way out to 2040. That's a long time that you can hold on to that BW environment if that's what you choose to do. But the benefit of BDC is that we're going to give you the mechanism to actually migrate it over. And then as your backend systems, particularly like S4 changes, you're going to need to change a lot of what you're doing from a BW extraction anyway. Don't do it in BW anymore, do it in BDC. Now, those are some of the SAP scenarios, but some of the ones that I get as well are, we already have a strategy with our SAP data. We're pulling it into S3 buckets, Azure Data Factory, Snowflake,
Yeah.
all of these third-party extraction destinations. And why would I go ahead and use BDC in that case? And the
Yep.
reality is, you have to ask yourself this question where we started in the first place. How much time and energy are you spending going from data all the way around that wheel to analytics? If you're like the typical organization and it's north of 70%, 80%, 90%, as a CIO, I heard last week talking about this, 90% of their time is spent just moving data to get it prepared for analysis. How much do you want to continue to do that? Nobody likes to be looked at as a cost center.
Yep.
Everybody likes to be seen as somebody that is providing value to the organization. If you're part of an organization and you are seen as a cost center because the amount of energy it takes to get the data from where it sits to where it needs to be is exorbitant, 9/10 maybe of the overall cost of asking those questions, that's not a great place to be. If you can shrink that as much as possible, then you can actually live up to some of those things that everybody would like to say, like data is the new gold, data is the new oil. The value of data is immeasurable. We can do so much with our business because of the data. We could be a data-driven organization. All of these things can become possible, but not so easy when 9/10 or 8/10 of the cost is just getting the data where it needs to be. That's the big thing that needs to be focused on as it relates to some of these ideas that let's go ahead and do the, what I still call old school, extract, transform, load, model, profile, catalog, govern, and create all of the overhead that is necessary to actually deliver those analytics back to the organization. And if you're in a part of your organization where you think it's good enough for me to just extract all the data and drop it over here and let the business go have fun, that's another one where you're not providing additional value to the organization. What the business community really wants is they want curated data that is business context aware, that is in a position to help them answer questions out of the box, push button, an actual software as a service. That's what we've got with BDC. So this idea that you've already got a strategy in place, it might be working right now because you did a ton of work to get you where you are. But here's the kicker. It's probably all going to change. Maybe not next year, but maybe 2 years or 3 years. Maybe the next time you do some major upgrade and we've become more efficient in terms of how we store the data in the business applications or any of the other business applications that you use, they change their underlying architecture in how they are actually storing the data in those source systems. Guess what just changed with your data strategy? Potentially everything. Yeah. And we have customers that this has happened to them, where I've walked into a huge SAP customer and I had a conversation with them where I said, we're going to go ahead, and this is before we had 2 separate entities, a BDC and BTP. And I walked into this session with the customer and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and tell you everything that we could do in the space of data and analytics and everything within the platform space. And the customer said, I don't think we really need to hear about your data and analytics strategy because we're pretty well set on that. And I said, I want to talk to you about all these things, and I need to talk to you about this one as well. This one's not negotiable. I need whoever's responsible for data and analytics to be in the room to discuss this. And that person did arrive, and that person pretty much felt like they had everything figured out. They didn't want to engage in the conversation at all. Pretty much arms crossed throughout most of the meeting. And we finally got to a point where they said, all right, I can see that there's some benefits, to how this works, but I'll tell you, they were on ECC on HANA. And so fast forward 6 months and they are negotiating the RISE opportunity with S/4HANA in a private cloud and RISE. And they now realize that everything needs to be changed. It's good that we had this conversation with them about how you could access the SAP data through, at the time, DataSphere, which is now Business Data Cloud because they now understand that for them to be able to get access to the data in the way they want, the fastest way they want, and for the fact that we're curating all that data for them and then providing them out of the box insights with our insight apps, this is pretty much a no-brainer on their part. They knew that they had to explore it, and they knew they had to explore it for the SAP centric question, but also for the non-SAP centric question, where they want to pull smaller data sets to non-SAP capabilities because
Mhm.
we are going to curate those scenarios through data products that will allow them to pull that data into those non-SAP scenarios. So these are some of the big plays. We've got that existing SAP solutions. We've got that non-SAP centric approach. And then ultimately, if you haven't got to the point that you're deciding what you're going to do, or you don't have a very mature data strategy, maybe you're a growing company, at some point you're going to need to go ahead and start asking those data and analytics questions. Just know that it's very expensive, as I've said before, to move the data
Mhm.
from one place to another, place it there, do all of those things that we've talked about in the past, and then deliver
Yeah.
analytics. Just pull it out of the box. The last comment I'll make is that pull it out of the box, sometimes that's not as useful as we think it is. If I said you have to dig a hole that's 10 feet deep and you started from ground level, you have 10 feet to dig. But if I gave you something that got you 50% of the way, I dug 5 feet for you. I dug 6 feet for you. Would you rather just dig 5 more feet or 4 more feet? Or would you just rather start from ground level and dig 10 feet on your own? That's
Yeah.
the value that we were trying to demonstrate through BDC.
Good explanation. And I think it's really clear that a lot of times conversations come up about SAP customers talking about their on-prem, their legacy systems, and how they will benefit from BDC. But your examples went beyond HANA Enterprise to other non-SAP solutions where customers have already been on the journey and they don't see the value, at least at this point. But after seeing the example you use, it's very logical for them to start thinking in those terms also, saying, hey, how can I simplify my landscape, still get, if not same, at least the value that whatever else that BDC brings to the table, like the whole AI capability, all of that can be leveraged by adopting this platform. On a personal note, how do you stay on top of this changing technology world and business at the same time? How do you keep up with all this?
And as you might imagine, in the space of SAP, oftentimes it's hard enough just staying on top of all of the different options we have and different things that we have in terms of technology. So one of the ways that I like to keep up in the SAP space is called the BTP Talk podcast,
Mhm.
which is a pretty good one. It actually goes through a number of different, platform and data and analytics related scenarios. Data Skeptics is another pretty good podcast that I get a kick out of. There's another one I'm trying to think of that I use from time to time as well. Analytics Power Hour. That's it. Yeah, the Analytics Power Hour is another good one. And I've been paying attention to tech driven business as well, too. So I like this one too. But, the thing that I've been finding too is that these days things move so quickly and we think we know where we're going. And then something comes along and makes us change direction again. And AI has probably been the biggest driver to that.
Mhm.
The thing that I would say that probably most interesting in terms of how I've changed how I operate is I actually ask AI to provide resources for me on particular topics. For example, early last year, there was a lot of talk about vector engines and knowledge graphs.
Yeah.
And the easiest thing I found to really kind of get a little bit more versed on the topics was AI itself. I started asking for resources. And I'll use, for example, ChatGPT in some cases. I like using Grok as well from time to time.
Mhm.
They seem to provide a little bit different types of approaches and levels of interaction. I kind of like how Grok will ask me follow-up questions, which is pretty neat as well. But that's a great way to learn about topics that you are wanting to become more versed in or learning where the resources are to find those topics. So those are some of the things that I like to use.
Great list of ideas to kind of keep up in the changing, just everywhere around us, taking from AI to just careers to anything else. Like a lot of conversations going on in so many different directions. How do you even keep up with them? So I like your suggestions. And I know we talked about a lot of different things today. What is that one thing or one takeaway that you want to leave our listeners with?
Probably in the audience of that are responsible for data and analytics. If you're a CDAO or an analyst or somebody that's responsible for enterprise-wide analytics, I would focus on two things because these two things are probably the most important to the people that you serve, your business community. Point number one is they want analytics quickly. They want to be able to ask questions quickly. They don't want to wait. They don't want to say, this report, these data sets that you've provided me, they look really interesting, but I'd like to add this and this and this. And when can I have that? If you can't say you can have that now, then you're taking too long. The other point is we need to stop being looked at as a cost center. We need to stop being looked at as a place that is a necessary evil. We got to ask questions of the system. We've got to extract data everywhere and put it in some place that we can start answering questions that we're even not even doing to the extent of actually providing the analytics out of the box. Instead, we're just providing data sets for people to access. We need to be able to offer real value to the business community. Those are the ones that are footing the bill. Those are the ones that are actually paying for everything. So we need to be in a position to deliver it very quickly, and it needs to not be expensive, and it needs to be accurate. So
Absolutely.
those are the elements I
Great.
think are the key takeaways. That's really the foundation of what we're doing with Business Data Cloud. That's the whole purpose behind it.
Absolutely. Great advice and a great way to sum up the session. It's been a great conversation. There's so much to gain from this product and the direction that SAP is taking. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today in our show and look forward to having further detailed conversation with you.
Thanks. I appreciate your time as well.
Thanks for listening to Tech Driven Business brought to you by Innovative Solution Partners. We have covered the critical why behind BDC, the immense time and cost savings it promises, and the tangible benefits like enhanced speed and accuracy for SAP customers. Shawn's key takeaway: focus on delivering analytics quickly to your business community and strive to offer real, accurate value, moving away from being seen as just a cost center. We would love to hear from you. Continue the conversation by connecting with me on LinkedIn or X. Learn more about Innovative Solution Partners and schedule a free consultation by visiting isolutionpartners.com. Never miss a podcast by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Information is in the show notes.